It's the final month of May. So why not recap the month of May, a May that saw a lot of moments for the Pittsburgh Pirates.
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates, every single day. My name is Ethan Smith. You could find this show on YouTube and all of your audio platforms free and available to you every Monday through Friday. You could find me on Twitter at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates for all of your news, analysis, opinions, and reactions to everything going on in the world of the Pittsburgh Pirates. And as always, we do have wonderful sponsors here on the Locked On Podcast Network. They do a phenomenal job making this show free and available for you. And one of those is FanDuel. Make sure you go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn. More on them later. It is Friday, May 31st, the final day of the month of May. And if you want me to be quite honest, folks, I think that this year has kind of just flown by. Not only the baseball season, just in general. It feels like yesterday that we were talking about the Pirates offseason and talking about the Pirates getting Aroldis Chapman and Rowdy Tellez and Michael A. Taylor, and would Mitch Keller get an extension, and when would Paul Skenes and Jared Jones be up? A lot of those questions have been answered already about some of those players and things that we've seen already. We're about a third of the way through the season. I think just a little over a third now. And we'll obviously preview the Toronto Blue Jays series in the final segment of today's show. But I think if you're talking about the month of May for this Pittsburgh Pirates team, a month that saw them play relatively well. It was a month where they had their ups, they had their downs. Obviously, at the beginning of the month, they were kind of on that stretch where the offense just was not really doing anything. That Cubs big stretch was coming up, and it looked like things were going to be very dismal. Pirates eventually figured it out offensively, and that's a big sticking point. We'll talk about that in a moment. But if you're talking about the month of May, you have to start with Paul Skenes. Paul Skenes, obviously, one of the most highly touted prospects in all of baseball, comes up on May 11th. We all remember me being there. A ton of you were there. I got to meet a ton of you that day. It was a phenomenal day. And that debut is something that I think myself and everybody else that was there or watching on TV or listening on the radio or however you ingested Paul Skenes' debut, I think everybody will remember that day as one of the days in Pirates history where arguably the most highly touted prospect in Pirates history debuted. And Paul Skenes, if you guys read my 5 up, 5 down piece over at Steel City Pirates, I had him as one of the guys who was playing up, obviously, and he was the first guy that I put on the list. I mean, folks, you look at what he's done already. And obviously, he's going to be done for the month of May. He's not pitching today, as a lot of these players are going to be done for the month of May that we'll talk about outside of the game tonight. But, I mean, 22 innings pitched through 4 starts already for Paul Skenes, a 2.45 ERA, 30 strikeouts in those 22 innings, a 0.91 whip, a 68% strike rate, pairing that 68% strike rate with a 35.7% strikeout rate and a 33.7% whiff rate. Yeah, Paul Skenes has looked every bit as good as what we expected him to look at. But what I think has been more impressive that we've seen from Skenes, especially in his debut month in May, is that we knew coming into this that he had the elite fastball velocity. He had the elite fastball in general. How were his other pitches going to work? That being the slider, the splinker, and potentially a changeup that he's been working in. Well, the splinkers worked pretty damn good, if you ask me. 0.067 opponent batting average against the splinker so far. And if we remember on Wednesday in the second half of that doubleheader, he had 9 strikeouts on the game, 4 of those coming from the splinker. So what's been very good for Skenes has just been the fact that not only is the fastball working, the other pitches are working too. And he's also found ways for when his stuff is not 100%, which we saw in that San Francisco Giants game. And really, his debut against the Chicago Cubs, he still finds ways to get out of trouble and still finds ways to give out a quality start. And a lot of that also has to be credited too because of the 52.1% ground ball rate that he has right now. And yeah, his barrel rate at 6.3 is a little high, but it's not worrisome high. But, what we've seen from Skenes is, I think, a lot of what we expected to see from Skenes. I just don't know if a lot of us expected it to be this soon. I expected around this time to be when Skenes would come up, maybe the following series against, or the series that follows this upcoming series against the Blue Jays, against the LA Dodgers, or the Twins one over the weekend. That's kind of when I expected Paul Skenes to come up and when I thought Paul Skenes would really have a chance to get up. Pirates did something that I urged them to do last season, which was call up one of their top prospects ahead of that big stretch against the Chicago Cubs, the Brewers, and the Cubs again. And they did that. And we remember in 2023, that was kind of the derailment of their season, is when they decided not to call up Endy Rodriguez and Henry Davis. They lost 9 consecutive games in the NL Central, including one on the back end to the Miami Marlins, to go 0-10 over that 10-game stretch, and they never recovered from it. This year, in the month of May, against those teams, they found a way to, I believe it was, they found a way to split that 10-game set against the Brewers and the Cubs, who at the time were the top 2 teams in the NL Central. The Brewers still atop of it right now. The Cardinals have kind of surged a little bit. They're in second place now. Cubs sit in third. But that was a big stretch for me personally, because again, you want to be competitive in your division. And so far, the Pirates have been a pretty competitive team in their division, albeit they did lose that series in Milwaukee, but they split with the Brewers earlier in the year to win 2 out of 4. They lose that series to the Cubs, but then come back and win 3 of 4 against Chicago, and really should have swept that series. If you want to ask me, they should have, because Cody Bellinger was out at the plate, I think. But that's so far in the past now that you don't really want to worry about it all that much. But when you can manage at least 500 baseball, especially when 6 of those games, or 7 of those games were on the road, that is a massive win, including that series win over the Cubs at Wrigley Field. Another guy, though, who had a strong May, and I think kind of got a little bit overshadowed from it because Skenes was coming up the next day, is Nick Gonzalez. If we remember, Nick Gonzalez on that Friday game where Jared Jones started the day before Skenes debuted, Gonzalez in his first at-bat back in the bigs got a 2 RBI single, and immediately ever since that point has just looked really good. He has hit the baseball pretty much everywhere. He's continued to find ways to get on base. His strikeout numbers are a little bit down, thank God, from last season, because that was the thing that Nick Gonzalez was struggling the most with, was the strikeout rate. But through 64 at-bats, when you talk about a slash line of 313, 375, 547, and 922 for Nick Gonzalez, along with 3 home runs and 16 RBIs, you're going to take that. Especially as a guy who's been in the middle of the lineup, has been a consistent RBI machine since coming up, has already surpassed some guys who have plenty of more at-bats than him at the MLB level so far. But go back to that strikeout to walk rate for a minute. Last season, he had 6 walks and 36 strikeouts last year. Not a great ratio at all. It was something that he struggled with in the minors that just carried over to the major leagues that he could never really figure out. Well, this season, he's already found the free pass 5 times, has almost matched his total from last year, and he's only struck out 18 times. So he's doing pretty good. He's still kind of on that pace for 1/3, but I don't think that he's going to continue to strike out at a considerable rate, because he's hitting breaking balls much better this year. He's finding ways to get on base. He's adjusting at the plate a lot more. And he was one of the better call-ups that the Pirates have made in quite a while, because you've seen guys like Jack Sawinski and Henry Davis, who were both sent down this month, had their struggles at the MLB level. Gonzalez started the season in AAA this year, looked good in AAA through the entirety of his stint down there, comes back up, and has done well so far. Ji-hwan Bae has not exactly had the same amount of success that Gonzalez has had, but he was off to a torrid start in AAA as well, and has come up and given the Pirates some speed that they needed on this roster that they haven't had all season. But what I do also find interesting as well for Gonzalez for a minute is the 988 OPS versus righties and 12 of his 16 RBIs coming versus right-handers. I like that a lot. And with runners in scoring position, he's collected 11 RBIs and has an OPS of 888. So you like what you see from Gonzalez so far. And when you pair Gonzalez and Skenes and kind of talk about what's been going right for this Pirates team as of late and in the month of May, well, again, I mentioned it earlier that they had that really slow start to the month that kind of carried over from the month of April. And it was nice to see them finally come out of that. And I think you kind of saw them come out of it after that Paul Skenes debut against the Chicago Cubs, because prior to that, in the month of May, they scored 0 runs, 2 runs, 1 run, 5 runs, 4 runs, 0 runs, 4 runs, 2 runs. They explode for 10 against the Cubs. And then they followed that by scoring 4, 8, 3, 2, 5, 9, 0, 3, 7, 5, 6, 11, 4, and 1, and 10 and 0 in the final games of the month of May, which I think is just big. We've seen this offense kind of pick it up as of late. Andrew McCutchen has been a big part of that out of the leadoff spot after a slow start in April. He's really picked it up. Brian Reynolds obviously had a big series against Milwaukee and has had his moments throughout the year. Connor Joe has remained a steady presence in the lineup as well. So you added Nick Gonzalez to that, and it's just made the offense at least be serviceable most nights now, rather than having these long stints where they just look awful. And the starting pitching staff has looked really good. We obviously know that Martin Perez is on the IL right now. I would expect that the Sunday starter would be Quinn Priester. We have not gotten that confirmed yet, but that would be the expectation. And the rest of the starting pitching staff has looked good. Mitch Keller had a phenomenal month after a somewhat bad April. Bailey Falter, who's been the surprise of this season so far for the Pittsburgh Pirates, has continued to look really good. And things seem like they're starting to come together. I just think the frustration among me right now, and probably a lot of you listening to the show, is that they're so close to getting back to 500 or just under 500 or just above 500. They just need a little winning streak to come their way. And that's kind of what I think we're looking for right now is, can they get on a winning streak? And we know what they're doing right. They're pitching well starter-wise. They're starting to hit the ball a lot more. But what's went wrong and what went wrong in the month of May? We'll discuss that in just a moment. Today's episode of Locked On Pirates is brought to you by FanDuel. Make sure you go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn because the NBA Finals are set. It is going to be the Boston Celtics versus the Dallas Mavericks. And if you think you have a little bit of an insider knowledge on who's going to win game 1 of the NBA Finals, make sure you go to FanDuel and bet on it. And we're still waiting on the NHL Finals, the Stanley Cup Finals as well. Florida just picked up a big victory to go up 3-2 against the Rangers last night. The Oilers and the Stars will play tonight to see who takes a big 3-2 advantage in that series. So you can bet on all of the NBA playoff and NHL playoff action because FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and so much more. You could bet on the Pirates while you also bet on the Mavericks or the Celtics or the Panthers or the Rangers or the Blue Jays if you're really, 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 really spicy about it. But make sure you visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and make every playoff shot count and every home run count because FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook and an official sponsor of the Locked On Podcast Network. And folks, make sure you check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It is available free to you 24/7 on YouTube and Amazon Fire TV. You can find all of your sports knowledge, all of your sports news from the local experts of Locked On, like myself, over at Locked On Sports Today, or Lost for short. So the month of May saw a lot of fun moments for this Pirates team, and it saw a lot of not so fun moments for this Pirates team. We remember the Saturday in Wrigley Field with Cody Bellinger sliding into home and being called safe, a game where the Pirates did not score any runs. Cubs win that game 1-0. But we're going to speak about last week, probably for the final time now. I know I've kind of passive aggressively brought it up on the show the last week. But the Pirates got a pretty big series win against the Atlanta Braves over the weekend. They split with the Detroit Tigers. So, they're 3-5 or 3-2 in their last 5 games. Not bad. You go back to that and you say, okay, they split against the Tigers. They win against the Braves. They won against the Cubs. There's one in the middle there, though, that still bugs me and bugs a lot of you, and it should. And it's that San Francisco Giants series. The San Francisco Giants series kicked off the homestand, the final homestand of May. Pirates obviously had that heroic comeback down 6-2 to the San Francisco Giants in the bottom of the 9th, coming back to win that game 7-6 in the bottom of the 10th inning. And the aforementioned Nick Gonzalez got the walk-off. The 2 games after that, though, I think frustrated a lot of people. And it frustrated me very much. I'm sure it frustrated a lot of you very much, to the point where I released a show called This Is Just Flat Out Frustrating, because it was. Now, I did hear Jim Stam mention about that Giants series that the Pirates did get a gift in that first game. They did. And they were lucky to get that gift in that first game from Camilo Doval, who had his first blown save since September. The following 2 games, I think, were just very frustrating, though, because those were very, and I mean very, winnable games, where you had Jared Jones on the mound on Wednesday, I believe it was, for that game. You were dominating for most of it. You had a grand slam in that one from Brian Reynolds, I believe it was. Yes, it was Brian Reynolds. And that was a Jared Jones start where Jones gave you 6 innings, 3 earned runs, 5 strikeouts, 3 walks. Looked really good. He had a quality start. Bullpen comes in and just blows it out of proportion. They lose 9-5. The following day, you have Paul Skenes on the mound. 6 innings pitched, 1 earned run, 3 strikeouts. Hunter Stratton gives up 5 earned that day. They can't recover from it. They lose 7-6. Those were 2 games that if you flip the script on those and just say the Pirates sweep the Giants, in hindsight, they do beat the Braves and they split with the Tigers, and we didn't know that at the time. But folks, if they win those games, the Pirates right now are a 26-30 baseball team. You flip those 2 games, guess what? They're a 500 team. I think the feeling is a little different. And a big portion of why that happened was because this bullpen has just had its moments. It really has. It's just been a bullpen as of late that has not looked good. It's a unit that I said was going to be a top 10 unit in baseball. I still believe it has the potential to do so, but it has seen its struggles this year so far. And David Bednar, for instance, has picked it up as of late. He's been very good. Colin Holderman has been one of the best relievers in all of baseball as of late, not just the National League. Aroldis Chapman, he, despite his bad starts or his bad outings that he had this month, you look at Aroldis Chapman and you say, he had a 3.86 ERA in May. Not all that bad. The middle relief, I think, is what has been detrimental to this team so far, and that's been Hunter Stratton, Kyle Nicholas, Luis Ortiz. You look, Carmen Majinski, even, who's coming off of a very strong rookie season, has not looked that great. And I think that's where you're starting to kind of see the impact now of losing a guy like Dowry Moretta for the entire season. A guy last year who was one of the better strikeout pitchers in all of baseball, one of the better guys in not allowing runners on base to score whatsoever, is out for the year. Ryan Borucki has been hurt for a good portion of the year. I know a lot of people had their indifferences about Borucki, but Borucki was one of their better relievers last season. So you start removing these guys from the picture, and you're kind of seeing the cracks open with guys like Hunter Stratton, who I still think is very good. He's just had a lot of blow-up moments so far this year. Carmen Majinski has proven he can be a good relief pitcher in this league. Kyle Nicholas, kind of up and down. Luis Ortiz is the one that's interesting to me, though, because I just don't like the way they use him. I don't think they use him correctly. I don't think that he's used enough. And they almost feel like they use him as a starter. And they only bring him in when the game is either out of reach on either side or when runners are on base, and he just doesn't operate well that way. And that's something that Derek Shelton, Oscar Marin, they're going to have to figure out. They're going to have to figure these things out because you cannot have a bullpen blow games up like this, especially in games when you have Jared Jones and Paul Skenes pitching. I know Jones had a kind of shaky start on Wednesday, but you cannot afford to waste starts where Jones and Skenes give you quality starts, which is 6 innings pitched and 3 earned runs or less. You cannot afford to give those up. And another thing that I think the Pirates could also kind of learn from the first 2 months as well is to just play the right guys. Just play the right guys. Andrew McCutchen, Brian Reynolds, Connor Joe, O'Neill Cruz, Nick Gonzalez, and Ke'Bryan Hayes should be in the lineup every single day, barring need for rest, barring injury. I don't care what the matchup is. Those guys should be in the lineup every single day. What you do at 7, 8, and 9, figure that out. Right now, Olivares would be playing over Michael A. Taylor every single day. Michael A. Taylor has been nothing but a dead spot in the lineup as of late. And you look at, I would probably have Ji-Hwan Bae in there too. I think Ji-Hwan Bae getting on base and creating chaos for the top of that lineup as a 9-hole hitter looks phenomenal. I think that's something that can work out really well for this Pirates team moving forward. And I think it adds a new dynamic to the offense if you have Ji-Hwan Bae down there in the bottom of the order, handing it off to the top of the lineup, stealing bags, and doing things that are good for him. And then Yasmani Grandal. I think he's looked good so far. You obviously have Grant Cook as your backup catcher right now with Joey Barr on the IL. A lot of people have called for Henry Davis to come back. I just don't think he's ready to come back just yet. And that's just how I feel about that. But that's what the lineup should be every day. Right now, it should be Andrew McCutchen, Brian Reynolds, Connor Joe, O'Neill Cruz, Nick Gonzalez, Ke'Bryan Hayes, Edward Olivares, Yasmani Grandal, and Ji-Hwan Bae. That's what it should be every day, right now. That lineup gives you the best chance to win every single day at this current moment. Now, I understand matchups and rest and injuries and stuff like that. But if none of that is on the table, that should be your lineup every day. And that's what the Pirates should be fielding going into June, because it gives them the best chance to win. And June is a pretty big month. We remember June last year. It's a pretty big month. And that month will kick off with the Toronto Blue Jays as the Pirates go north of the border to take on my favorite American League team, if you didn't know that about your host, Ethan Smith. So we'll discuss that series in just a moment. Folks, we know that Pittsburgh Pirates players, Pittsburgh Pirates fans, Toronto Blue Jays fans, Toronto Blue Jays players, they like to look good. They like to feel that they look good, especially with the clothing that they wear. And I'm doing that right now, obviously sporting this really cool Pirates shirt that I got from a thrift store, but I'm pairing it with pants that I like a lot. Pants that make me feel good. They make the style look good. They make the whole outfit come together. And you can do that at stitchfix.com/MLB because it's style so good that you can feel it. You get instant confidence from an outfit that makes you look really good, right? And that's what I get with Stitch Fix. You can easily upgrade your wardrobe this year with a professional stylist. Yeah, I look like a guy who needs a stylist, right? That helps you find new on-trend favorites that will work for you. All I have to do is just give my stylist my sizes, my style, and my budget preferences. The biggest part being the budget preferences because I don't like to spend a lot of money on clothing. And I order boxes when I want and how I want with absolutely no subscription required. And they send 5, yes, 5 just for me pieces plus outfit recommendations and pro styling advice. I keep what works. And if I don't like the other stuff, I just send it back. Style that makes you feel as good as you look. Get started today at stitchfix.com/MLB and get $20 off your first fix. Fix with an X, by the way. That's Stitch Fix, again, with an X.com/MLB for $20 off. Stitchfix.com/MLB. Must redeem within 7 days of sign up to start looking good today. And welcome back to the final segment of today's episode of Locked On Pirates here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates, every day. And your Pittsburgh Pirates are heading north of the border. No, there's not Tim Hortons in this coffee cup. To take on the Toronto Blue Jays. As you heard me mention before the ad break, the Blue Jays are somewhat of my American League team. I'm obviously all Pirates, but if I have to root for another team, I usually tend to go to the American League, and the Blue Jays have been that team for a very long time. I was a major Jose Bautista fan. I'm a big Vlad Guerrero fan. I'm a big Bo Bichette fan. I like a lot of things that the Toronto Blue Jays have been doing, but I don't think Blue Jays fans like what the Toronto Blue Jays have been doing, especially with a roster that you would expect with a much better record coming into this series against the Pittsburgh Pirates. This will be the 26-30 Pittsburgh Pirates at the 26-29 Blue Jays. And you look at both of these teams coming into this series. You can also check out my series preview over at Steel City Pirates if you want to check that out on this series. And we already know about the Pirates. Split the doubleheader against the Detroit Tigers. Skubal shutting them down game 1, Skenes shutting them down game 2. Toronto has played the Chicago White Sox 6 times in the past week. Chicago White Sox, not much to say about that team. Just not a lot going on for the Chicago White Sox right now and their fan base. And Toronto swept the Chicago White Sox in their last series, scored 2 runs or won by 2 runs or more in all those games. But I think most people would agree that the Pirates are a better team than the Chicago White Sox. But for the Pirates, I find this interesting because they're 5-5 in their past 10. They have an 11-12 record in the month of May. So they have a chance to be 500 in the month of May and not lose any ground from the way they entered the month. And what I find interesting as well is that the Pirates find a way to win this series. All they have to do is win this series. They could be playing 500 baseball on the road. They come into this series 14-15 on the road away from the North Shore. Toronto 12-12 at Rogers Center this year. And we look at the history of these two teams before we get into the pitching matchups. The Blue Jays have won the last 8 games that they've played against the Pittsburgh Pirates, and the Pirates in all of those 8 games failed to score more than 3 runs. So very interesting little history bit for you. The last time the Pirates won a game against the Blue Jays was August 11th, 2017. And of course, their last matchup came last year on May 7th with a 10-1 victory for the Blue Jays. Blue Jays leading the all-time series 14-7, holding a 6-3 record all-time, or 6-3 home record all time versus Pittsburgh. You look at the pitching matchups, which I think is going to be, as usual, the difference going into this series. It will be Bailey Falter versus Jose Barrios. Falter does come in with a better ERA, less strikeouts than Barrios, less walks than Barrios, lesser whip than Barrios, or better whip than Barrios. Barrios, still a very good pitcher, though. 67.1 innings pitched, a 2.94 ERA, 53 Ks to 18 walks. Going to be an interesting one for the Pirates tonight. It'll be Mitch Keller, who will get his first start in June after a sub-2 ERA May, against Yusei Kikuchi on Saturday. Keller doing pretty well on the year. Kikuchi as well, 61 innings pitched, 3.25 ERA, 61 strikeouts to 13 walks, has looked pretty good. As mentioned on Sunday, I expect that it'll be Quinn Priester, but it has not been confirmed yet, against Chris Bassett. Bassett is probably the worst pitcher the Pirates will see in this series. 60 and a third, 4.03 ERA, 56 Ks, 25 walks, and a 1.43 whip on the season. And I highlighted in that piece on Steel City Pirates, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. I think he could be one of the bigger sticking points in the series. He has a 6.07 slugging over his past 7 games, 3 eyes on 11 hits. Meanwhile, I highlighted Andrew McCutchen for the Pirates. 843 OPS in May, 12 RBIs in his past 30 games out of the leadoff hole. I think it'll be a big thing for him. Obviously, the Pirates will be without Joey Bart and Martin Perez. The Blue Jays will be without Yariel Rodriguez, TJ Brock, Peyton Williams, Bowden Francis, and Joey Votto. But again, I think it's going to come down to the pitching staffs. These staffs come in with a 4.22 ERA for Toronto, a 4.03 for Pittsburgh, but both of these bullpens ERAs are in the bottom 5 in baseball right now. So I think the big sticking point and the key to victory for this Pirates team, and arguably the key to victory for this Jays team, is to get after the starters and get to those bullpens, because right now those bullpens have been struggling and they're not good units at this current moment. So if the Pirates can chase Barrios, Kikuchi, and Bassett earlier in these games, they have a good chance to win. But we'll see how it all plays out at Rogers Center this weekend to kick off the month of June and end the month of May. Folks, thank you for another phenomenal month of Pirates baseball here on the Locked On Pirates podcast. I love giving you guys these shows. I love seeing your comments. I love interacting with all of you. Make sure you follow on Twitter at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates for all of your news, analysis, opinions, and reactions to everything going on in the world of the Pittsburgh Pirates. You can find this show on YouTube. Hit the notification bell and subscribe so you know when Locked On Pirates is coming your way. And make sure you find it on all of your audio platforms as well. That can be Spotify, Odyssey, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Folks, have a wonderful rest of your Friday. Enjoy your weekend. We'll be back Monday. But until then, see you on the flip side.